Now I want to look into software for lean video production. In particular, software for production and post-production, not so much for pre-production. You may use a spreadsheet, maybe even a collaborative one, or some drawing tools for pre-production, for instance. Here I'm focusing on production and post-production. Typically, we want to do some presenting, including screen recording, in particular, for instance, for Khan-style videos. During post-production, we may have to do video editing, which includes audio editing most of the time. Admittedly, I have to say we want to keep the amount of video editing as small as possible to have a lean process. In particular, for accessibility, we may want to or even are required to transcribe the videos, for instance, to create subtitles. And finally, there's a range of tools to support us with creating quizzes and other interactive elements. A basic set of authoring tools for these elements may already be available in the MOOC platform, but additional software may offer a quicker workflow or more versatility. The first question often raised is that of which platform one should be using. For full professional functionality, you need to look into Windows and macOS, of course. If you never used Linux before, maybe it's no good idea to start with that when producing a MOOC. For tablets running iOS or Android, there's a range of inexpensive apps that can do everything from recording to editing, but of course in a much more lightweight fashion than the huge applications running on Windows and macOS. An option that becomes more and more attractive in terms of functionality and pricing are web-based applications. Applications that live in the cloud and are accessed through the web browser and the internet. One benefit of these applications is that you have access to your data wherever you have access to the internet, and possibly also offline access. Another benefit is that most of these applications support collaborative working. Several persons can work together, even work together on the same document at the same time. Now let's look into which software could be used for presenting. I'd say there are 5 different types of presentation programs. The first one being applications like PowerPoint or PDF Annotator that allow you to annotate your slides in real time, like what I'm doing right now. This is, if you will, a blend of regular slides with Khan-style handwriting. Then there's straightforward presentation software such as Apple Keynote, presentation software that lives in the cloud such as Prezi and Google Slides, with Prezi being pretty conspicuous with its zooming animations, where you, for instance, zoom and rotate from the overall picture to just a tiny part of that overall picture. Then there's a number of all-in-one apps for the iPad and for Android tablets. Explain Everything being one of them. And eventually there's lots of writing and painting software. I, for my part, am using Windows Journal, which is included with Microsoft Windows. Very straightforward note-taking software. You could be using any kind of painting software as well. There is a number of useful features for presentation that I want to point out. First of all, handwritten notes. I mentioned those. But apart from notes, you want to be pointing like I'm doing now. You may get away with underlining and possibly removing those underlines. But of course it's much nicer to be able to point without drawing. What I'm using here is a visible marker for the pen position, a freeware that's called Pen Attention for Windows. You may also use some software that installs a big mouse cursor, like the one I'm using here. For a lean workflow, I would recommend against using a talking head, but if you really want to include one with your video, a simple solution may be to run webcam software along with the presentation software and record that video of your head along with the rest of the screen. A very simple solution is Microsoft Office Mix, which is an add-in for PowerPoint. It takes care of recording handwritten notes the video from the webcam, and also contains function for editing and even for producing quizzes. It's available free of charge for the Windows platform. If you're using other presentation software, or if you're using straightforward drawing or painting software, you need to install separate screen recording software, of which there are lots of choices, both to be paid for and free options. After we're done with recording, the step that consumes the most amount of time is video editing, in particular for cutting, editing out all those repetitions, putting together the best versions of all the takes that you tried. Video editing software is also responsible for fancy effects such as green screen, color keying. In particular, you record the lecturer in front of a green screen, and during video editing, replace that green screen by some other content. This would be one type of compositing, combining different videos or images in one single frame. Color grading refers to color correction. For instance, the skin may look too reddish or too yellowish. By color grading in the video editor, you get rid of such tints. To keep things manageable, you most probably don't want to replace or add audio. This should be done in emergency situations only. There are, however, some applications of audio processing that you should almost always be using. First, equalization, which is tone control. Get rid of boominess or boxiness by boosting or cutting certain ranges of frequencies. Noise reduction. If you're not recording in an acoustically insulated studio, you will have some background noise, for instance from the hard drive and the fans of the computer. Noise reduction can get rid of these. And as a third one, dynamics compression. Do not confuse dynamics compression with data compression, such as MP3. Dynamics compression does not refer to the data rate, it refers to differences in audio level. Some quieter parts, some louder parts, some quieter parts, some louder parts. Dynamics compression evens these out and hence improves intelligibility, as does equalization. When selecting software for video editing, most people think about those big tankers, Adobe, Premiere, Apple Final Cut, which are completely overloaded with functions. Tons of menus, tons of functions. You can get away with spending, say, 50 or 70 euros by buying smaller software, which still can do far more than you need. For most of my videos, I'm using Virtual Dub, a Windows software for basic video editing with lots of filtering and conversion functions. And if I do have to, for instance, remove noise from the audio track, I'm using Audacity, a free audio editing program. If you read CC, you may think of Creative Commons, but this is the older version of CC, closed captioning, which means subtitling. How do we provide for subtitles? We need a transcript. Amara.org has a nice two-step technique to support humans in subtitling YouTube videos. That's one option. An option that becomes more and more interesting is automatic speech recognition, with a human correcting the errors afterwards. This is, for instance, the current result of YouTube's speech recognition. So mostly this looks okay, but in some cases you really get strange results that you have to correct by hand. Emma, the European Multiple MOOC aggregator, also works on automatic speech recognition. And finally, there is interactive elements, including quizzes. Of course, most MOOC platforms already contain lots of authoring tools, in particular to build quizzes, but you may want to do more, or you may want to have more efficient tools. Luckily, it's mostly possible to embed external content in a MOOC. For instance, quizzes in the many styles that you can create with learningapps.org, or quizzes that appear as overlays on videos with capira.de. And this seems to become a trend, given that many web browsers can display 3D content using WebGL, virtual reality applications right inside a MOOC as embedded content should appear soon. If you have been working with learning management systems, for instance Moodle, Elias, Blackboard, for a longer time, this acronym may ring a bell. SCORM, or its newer version, the XAPI, TinCan API. The idea is to allow embedding pretty complex applications into a learning management system. With such APIs, the additional element that you're using is able to communicate back to the learning management system. For instance, to report the number of points awarded in a quiz. But for most MOOC platforms, this is not yet a topic. So, to wrap up, I described 5 categories of software for presenting, talked about what one is using video editors for, mentioned 2 ways of transcribing the audio track of videos, and outlined some ways of authoring interactive content.